Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We've just now covered 2,000 miles with the fresh engine in the Model A. We've also reached a point where we've traveled the exact same distance with the old filter as we did with the new one. Since we found swarf in the old filter, I now want to cut open the new one as well, along with an oil change, and find out whether there is more swarf in it than last time or less. Just to get an idea what the condition of the engine is. And to help assess that condition, I've also got a little something extra else to show you, and with that, let's just jump right into the video. Before we can assess the condition of the engine after 2,000 miles, we must first travel those 2,000. And along those travels, let me take you for a couple of highlights, namely our Model A club meeting and the Borgward club meeting.
Celebs and stage satellites, social debs and high hats, massives, glasses, doing the uptown lowdown, where they spend their simoleons just to watch those Creolians skipping, hipping, doing the uptown lowdown. You'll find laughter after midnight, that's their playtime, high-hay time. What price? Yeah, man. Bankers with their Cinderellatives, listening to those high relatives up in Harlem, doing the uptown lowdown.
During the meetup, I got lended two very valuable tools. Number one was a clear cap for the distributor, so you could see what's actually going on inside it. And number two was a device to measure toe-in. I was very unhappy with how quickly the tires wore down, and seeing that it's only at the fronts, I decided to measure just that. And turns out I had 10 times as much toe-in as was prescribed. Luckily enough, reducing the toe-in back to spec did not unearth something seriously wrong with the front axle, and so now I can continue on my way, hopefully not wearing through tires at a faster rate than oil changes. Next stop, Borgward.
place. People stop and stare, it's so hard to bear. Everybody knows you left me. It's the talk of the town. Every time we meet, my heart skips a beat. We don't stop to speak, though it's just a week. Everybody knows you left me. It's the talk of the town. We sent out invitations to friends and relations, announcing our wedding day. Friends and relations gave congratulations. How can you face them? What can you say? Let's make up, sweetheart. We can't stay apart. Don't let foolish pride keep you from my side. How can love like ours be ended? It's the talk of the town. Let's make up, sweetheart. We can't stay apart. Don't let foolish pride keep you from my side. How can love like ours be ended? It's the talk of the town.
Now that I had covered some more distance, it's of course time to wrench on the car again. I had corrected the toe-in, of course, but that still leaves me with the worn-out tires. Tires are pretty expensive, and seeing that they are only partially worn, I decided to try and recut the tread on them. I pretty much did a copycat move and completely copied a tool homemade by some Pakistani guy online who just uses a razor blade and a holder with a screw and a set of washers in between to carve himself new profile, and well, I decided it was worth a shot. That honestly went smooth as butter, holy lord. I guess if you make this for a living, then it'll look a little bit better. The main thing is that this tread will now keep water from, aquaplaning on here and actually direct this into the grooves. And now, of course, I'm going to discard these tires because they are no longer safe for road use after having altered the profile in any way, shape or form. You may or may not recall a time long ago when I tried to build my own oil filter kit, built it, and then bought one regardless. This is that, and I've modified it ever so slightly so that now this will be the new vacuum tank. It's a lot sturdier than that tin can before. I mean, you can't compress it to a bulk. And here are the new two input ports for vacuum, and then the port going off to the wiper. It's about the same size as the old can, I reckon, maybe a little bit tinier, but all in all, you know, it should do the same job, and it will conceal nicely behind the dashboard. Another happy coincidence I noticed: for the longest time I have been trying to find a way to regulate the speed of the wiper motor so that it wouldn't just, you know, escalate whenever going downhill, but, you know, have some kind of a limiter in there. And there are constant pressure valves available, but not for vacuum. So what I had found out was, upon using this flexible hose, that of course under vacuum it contracts and collapses, and that limits the speed of the wiper and is actually acting as a constant capacitor, which regulates the flow to the vacuum wiper to a nearly constant medium throughout, you know, different ranges of engine vacuum. So that's very nice for once. I got advised to put a one-way valve, check valve, into the line here, just in case the manifold vacuum falls off, for example during a backfire or during high speeds. Still working on getting my hands on one, but that's definitely on the to-do list. I've also gotten a bunch of ideas regarding my carburetor troubles, so let's dive into that and see if we can fix it. Some people have suggested balancing the carburetor. You see, when you drive an air filter, then there is a pressure difference between the intake, where the restriction of the filter is, and the air intake for the idle, which is unfiltered. Now the idea is to move the intake for the idle air around the venturi and into the same intake that the main air is sucked through, which requires a bit of modification on both the venturi and the housing, milling a slot and machining a slot. Before I do that, I'm just going to drive a while without a filter and see if that changes anything. Well, this is without a filter, same thing.
Is a regular contributor.
Same old shit.
Some of you suggested I was using the wrong type of gasket, and rather than the one-piece graphite I should use the copper compound type. Now I've tried to do everything right. Both surfaces were machined earlier on. I meticulously cleaned the mating surfaces. I used gasket sealant, I used the gland rings, I discovered a slight misalignment of the intake ports on the gasket, I corrected that, and I even used fresh hardware to clamp everything down. I torqued the nuts down to 40 pound-feet and retorqued them after one heat cycle. Here's how that turned out. Right. Well, it's not cold enough to justify that amount of choke. Yeah, I forgot something, dang it. Same old shit. Fresh gasket. Last not least, it's time for another lube job and oil change, so let us give the engine some attention and see how it's been doing over the last 2,000 miles. So the magnet on the drain plug still has a little bit of metallic residue on there, but it's really not much compared to the first time. Here's the little something I was talking to you about. I have succumbed to the allure of product placement actually. I got this thing for free by the company Vevor. They've sent me an endoscope. This is basically a handheld little camera on a wire, which you can use to, get into small crevices of bits and bobs and pieces. I was hesitant to take the oil pan off my engine because for once it's actually pretty leak proof. With this camera we won't need to do that. So I'm obliged to show you how this thing works and what it does. And with that we can then, put it into the engine and take a look at all the vital parts of it, even poke it down into the cylinders, inspect them and see what kind of condition the engine is in. We've got a manual, which we'll just disregard at this time. Then you have a unlockable slot here to put the cable for the camera into. This goes in both directions. Just have to make sure to unlock it and then plug it in until it snaps back. And then there's this big orange button over here, which you can press a little longer until it powers on. Now, before you do that, you should of course charge the thing. And to charge it, we have a USB port on the side, cable is included. Here's the SD card slot. They also included an SD card with this. And once it's charged up, you're ready to rock and roll. So you're right now seeing what the camera is seeing. So here, that's you. And I can right now demonstrate actually one function of this thing, which is you can adjust the brightness of these LEDs here by pressing this button. This is off, and then there is 3 different brightness steps, and you can shut it back off again. The left-hand button here is to change the camera angle. You see, this is not just one camera, this is actually 3 cameras. You can see one lens right here and one lens right here. And you can do different modes here. So if you press this briefly, then you're just changing the camera angle. Notice this is now filming down onto the table. Press it briefly again. You now have the camera pointing up towards me and you. And then you can also switch lights on and off and at different brightnesses here. You notice this is out of focus right now. That's because these are really close-up cameras. So if you're in a really tight spot and your focal length needs to be very close, then these are the cameras to go to. You can also do a mix. If you press this long, then you can now see on the display it says A and B. So on the one half of the screen you now see the frontal camera, and on the other half you can see the side camera, which is pretty handy if you want to maneuver your way into something with the front camera and then look at something from the side. This gives you a pretty good idea of where you're at, because keep in mind you're not always going to be seeing what you do. Press it once again and you are back to the standard mode. You can also rotate your picture around if you wish and zoom in and out with this. So this is zoom in, this is zoom out, and press it for a long time. Then you've just rotated your picture around, and of course you can do that the other way around as well. And last not least, down here you have your settings, which you can change if you want. And if you press this for a long time, then you're in your picture mode and you can take a look at the videos you've just taken. Press it once again and you're out of the menu. I am pretty impressed with the quality of the camera. You can really get up close and see details with this, even with poor lighting. I found myself not needing much more than the first brightness step of the camera. However, each time you've got your settings, let's say you've got brightness setting number 1 and you're in video mode, and you power this thing off, power it back on again, and you're once again in picture mode and brightness setting 3. So it doesn't keep the settings that you've given it. I have charged this thing once and done a number of inspections with it, let's say an hour total. it's still not lost any capacity. So either this is wrong or it's a pretty powerful accumulator. Now, I think I've talked enough about how to handle this thing. Now let's get at the object of desire and do some inspecting with it. Spark plug itself looks a bit on the lean side, if I'm honest. You can see the whitish deposits here. So, might be a little bit too restrictive on the gas adjustment valve. So here's the pokey bit. There is a valve. Again, whitish deposits indicating a little too lean. Exhaust valve is white all the way around. So yeah, I'm running way too lean. There's the piston. Now you can see the cross hatching. And just get in a little deeper and then switch on the side cameras. Oh my! That's not what I hoped to see. It's not deep scratches. Looks more like, you know, it's reflective and not a deep scoring. Can't see the light breaking in it. This is, by the way, facing the valve side of the engine. So the other side is pretty much mint. Well, I guess it makes sense, because the engine is rotating that way. Therefore the power stroke is with the connecting rod in that direction, and that puts power and stress onto that side. What you're seeing here is called single-sided piston jamming. If the clearance between the cylinder and the piston was too low, then you would have scoring all the way around. In this case, it's only on the pressure side, and that means that the oil film wasn't being sustained all the time during operation. That indicates either too high load, too thin of an oil, or too high of a temperature. I've checked all the other 3 cylinders and they looked pretty similar, but what I have to stress here is that this is not deep yet. You can see that it's worn through the cross-hatching in some points, but it's not deep scoring which would cause further damage to the cylinder and piston. I then took off the oil return line and fed the endoscope into there, because I wanted to take a look at the rotating parts of the engine and see if the swarf in the oil filter may have just come from there. But to be honest, it all looks brilliantly clean in here. The connecting rods are well centered in the piston, so they're not crooked or anything. There's no evidence of the bearing making any trouble, no discoloration from excessive heat or anything like that. So yeah, from this perspective it all looks fine. And you can see some minor scoring on the pistons themselves. So here is my interpretation of the matter. Number 1, the spark plugs just tell me the car has been running way too lean all the time. So my issue regarding all the popping from the carburetor, well, even if it runs well at high speeds, it's just too lean. Open up the gav and your problem is done. The added fuel consumption might not only be that it is a brand new motor, which is still tight probably, but also mostly related to the way more conservative ignition point at which I set the car. Max advance at the moment is 28 degrees because that is what the manufacturer of the bearings told me. In their papers it just says if you give it any more advance then the bearings will die. I'm open for discussion on that one. To my understanding, you should be able to just gradually increase the ignition angle, and at a certain point of pre-ignition the engine will just start running worse, and that's the point at which you shouldn't advance it anymore and not just say, well, the angle X is, you know, the point of no return. Other than that, the bearings will get damaged. Number 2, talking about damage, is the cylinder walls. That's not looking good, eh? Which coincides with me having some troubles overheating with the car. and I probably should have, you know, be a little bit more slower in these points and not just feather the onions while the engine was so hot. To see if this is getting any worse, we are now going to take a look inside the oil filter. We saw swarf there the first time round. If there is now swarf, or even more swarf than there was before, then I think it's a case of selling the car, sad as it may seem, but I'm not in for, you know, another costly adventure here. If there are no more chips, then we'll just leave it the way it is. It's not looking pretty, but hey, so many people don't know what the inside of their car looks like, and it just keeps on running and running and running. It's just a Model A Ford after all. Taking a look in here, you can already see that it looks a lot better than the first time round. There is no big chunks of glitter in there. And reading the Book of Truth, and it is also better. It's not perfect. You can see one chunk right there, and there's one there. But the amount, I mean, I could go through here with my fingers, remember, and they'd be full of it, and now it's clean. So yes, scoring across here you can see evidence of metal-to-metal contact, but since it's decreased in such an amount, I'd say we keep the car. How about that? I will keep doing this cut filter open routine, and should there be anything worrisome to be noted, and I'll let you know, of course. But for now, I think the filter is doing its purpose of keeping the debris out of the engine, and the engine is healthy to my knowledge.
Basically like glue. What's that? What's that? Nothing but a perfectly good running motor. Now sell it while you can.
Well, that was the news I was hoping to see. This shall also conclude this video. I have now put some oil additive into the engine, which is molybdenum disulfate based, and it ought to keep the wear down a little more. I've been using it in the transmission and the differential with positive effects, so why not give the engine a try? It is specifically made for engines, so I don't think it'll cause any harm, and it might help, you know, in those situations where the oil film can't be sustained, if that's the case, to just, you know, get a little something in between there to help things from wearing down. Anyways, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Bye.